this is our presentation on Earths by Colin Fanning. My name is Kate Lifstead.
And my name is Bubakar.
To start out, we'll start with an explanation of technology as futurism. So, technology as futurism can be summed up by the inventions and machines that shape how we imagine living in tomorrow's world. Two key areas that are influenced by this are cities and space. Our vision of a futuristic world has heavily influenced the design of many cities, skyscrapers, and new technologies. New technologies such as skyscrapers and highway systems shaped visions of future cities and how they would look. Examples of this include the 1939 World's Fair and its theme of Futurama. They had a vision of a metropolis which was thought to be the perfect city. Computers shaped visions of the society of the future as we entered the information age. They were seen as the electronic library of the future. An example of this is the 1964 World's Fair, which was heavily focused on technologies such as computers, satellites, and global media. This invention was thought to completely change the flow of information.
Then we're going to talk about contemporary media example. Computer electronic library of the future, television. The vision of computer represented our desire to turn trends behind human thought. Television, introduced at the 1939 World's Fair, also introduced the word to a future defined by innovation and progress. Exhibits such as General Motors, Futurama, and the public unveiling of the television represented the belief that technology could shape a better, more connected world. At this time, there was a great amount of optimism about the future human invention. Second speech age. We're going to talk about rapid space of scientific discovery, exciting policy, private space ventures, government intervention, and exploration of resources. Design must grapple with the idea of new frontier, closing extremely production, autonomous robots, and AI humanizing technological space assistant, making space travel more accessible, design as a radical tool, vision, and seduction. The Cold War and First Space Age. We are entering the second space age. This requires a rethinking of our current design, not just physical and aesthetic choices, but our system. Design must reckon with the culturally material and spiritually dimension of what frontier means. Clothing such as spacesuits adapt for growing amount of space travel. Design is a radical tool for young aerospace enterprise to promote their vision of space travel. This reframing challenged the old Cold War first space age model, stately national competition, and shows how design purchase objects and exhibition now play into a difference commercially reflect the space culture. It emphasized that frontier is not just a geographic or geographic or specific term, but a design analytical one, how we imagine visual and manufacture living, working, and interacting beyond Earth.
Getting into a discussion and critique of the second space age discussion in Earths. So, in Earths, Colin Fanning redefines the idea of the frontier. He views space not just as a place to conquer and exploit, but as a design construct that should reflect our cultural values, technologies, power structures, and more. Design shapes the imagination of a future Earth. This point is compelling because it exposes how design shapes not just objects, but also the imagination of what space and the future represent. The Cold War and the first space domination. So during the Cold War and the first space age, space design was about nationalism and technological superiority. In the second space age, design has become commercialized, aestheticized, and intertwined with private enterprise and consumer culture. And the company SpaceX, owned by the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, represents the commercialization of space travel, which is a shift from state led exploration to private enterprise. The company is not publicly traded, and they value sleek design and aesthetic and even have commandeered the infrastructure that was once used for government space efforts, such as their 20-year contract with NASA to use the Kennedy Space Center's Launch Complex 39A, which was the launch site for the first moon landing, and they have renovated it to match the company's corporate image. They have also used the site to support the launches of the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy rockets, and they have plans to add 2 landing zones in the future. So, getting onto our second main point, I call this the fragile frontier and high stakes. So, Fanning kind of posits that space design forces us to confront the fragility of life and the environment, and design expands discussion. So, it helps to expand the discussion of space travel beyond technocratic or utilitarianism. But however, private and government enterprise increase the unlikelihood of communitarian future envisioned in utopian views of futurism. So humans are very dependent on Earth's environmental systems, as discussed by Fanning, and he discusses how prolonged or low or zero gravity living takes a physiological toll on the human body, and we must grapple with issues of materiality. He also discussed how life on other planets presents problems with inhabitability, like life on Mars would mean living in thin atmospheres and weak magnetic fields. Also, threats of radiation, dust storms, human error, and technological failures, which are all lessened on Earth. It is important to think about how space exploration could affect alien life and their environment. We need to consider cohabitation with other life forms. They do have planetary protection protocols, but they are still imperfect. And one contemporary media example that Fanning cites in the text is the 2016 film Arrival, which features an exploration of alternative forms of communication and with extraterrestrials, in which the extraterrestrials have their own complex written language, which the humans in the film have to learn in order to communicate with them. So, all of this poses social, psychological, and philosophical questions, such as what toll would this take on humans? Um, he says in the text and cites other authors and states how colonization of space is often treated as a playground for the wealthy, but he says that other life on other planets should be treated as an opportunity for refuge for the dispossessed and nationless. And he says how space design isn't just about building rockets or futuristic colonies on the moon or on Mars. It's also about creating systems that are capable of sustaining life in extreme, resource scarce environments. So, going on to our discussion and critique of the fragile frontier point.
Parallel between Earth and space. So we're gonna talk about how the design is affects where technology and environment collide and clash. Space design as a reflection of humanity's treatment of Earth, idealistic views of humanity. By highlighting the parallel between Earth and space and our dependence of these systems, fanning the challenge readers to see the fragile frontier isn't just out there; it's also here, reminding us of Earth's own vulnerability. The same technologies used to sustain life in orbit or Mars, like recycling system or sustainability material, could also inspire more responsible design practice on Earth. One limitation of Fanon ideas is that it could be seen as idealistic, while it emphasizes care, susceptibility, the reality of space exploration in the second space age remain driven by profit. Competition and resource extraction companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are probably motivated by profits, not by ethics or ecological consideration.
So, going on to the third main point in the text, we will talk about Afrofuturism. So, this discusses access and inclusion. And in addition to rethinking the frontier, Fanning's discussion also points towards an often overlooked issue, which is who gets to participate in designing or even imagining the second space age. And Afrofuturism is a cultural aesthetic that reclaims visions of the future through the Black experience and creativity. and it basically reimagines what the future could look like through the Black perspective. And the question that we pose is who gets to participate in designing the second space age? So, commercialization and privatization of space has been shaped by wealth and power, and the contemporary space design and space travel is dominated by white Western elites. And while the rhetoric surrounding space travel celebrates innovation and progress, it often perpetuates inequality and exclusion. And a contemporary media example from the text that I would like to discuss is the Mundane Afrofuturist Manifesto by Martine Sims, which Fanning discusses in length. And this manifesto looks at common sci fi tropes and advises sci fi authors to reject these common stereotypes in favor of more plausible futures. And the manifesto also examines the existence of Black futures within a system of white oppression, which is framed through the lens of culture, identity, and power to reject futures that rely on normative white validation, and acknowledges that the futures imagined by much science fiction media, such as Star Trek or Star Wars, counter the majority of Black experiences in reality. And then moving on to our discussion of Afrofuturism.
Cultural and political aspect tied to vision of the future, and the imagery and design choices reflect cultural norms and power structure. Elon Musk, Afrofuturism provides counter-narrative, mainstream, often exclusionary narrative of the space, travel, and design. At this point, it's complaining because it exposes the cultural and political aspect of design that are often shared beneath language of innovation and progress. The imagery and design surrounding commercial space enterprises like SpaceX are not just aesthetic choices. They're narrative that reflect Western corporate and elite perspectives. This is also reflected in its owner, Elon Musk, who is former senior advisor to President Donald Trump, whose rhetoric rhetoric is heavily aligned with far-right activists and white nationalism, while the New Frontier narrative celebrates conquest and expansion. Afrofuturism envisions space as an opportunity for liberation from oppression.
So that was our Earth's presentation. We hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for listening.